I am so very pleased to hand it over to Kelly Barsdate, Chief Planning and Policy Officer at the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, to moderate our last session, Flashes of Inspiration. Take it away, Kelly.
Thank you so much, and hello, everybody. This Creative Aging Institute has been just fantastic. I want to thank you, Susan, for leading us through such an informative and inspiring agenda. It's been super to have an opportunity to look at the whole spectrum of creative aging work, from policy to practice. And it's a special treat for me to be part of this finale where we get to keep that inspiration rolling by hearing about the creative aging work underway in 3 states, Connecticut, North Carolina, and Arizona. They all are part of the grantee cohort for the Leveraging State Investments in Creative Aging initiative. And before they get underway, I'll just set the stage for their presentations by giving you some background on that initiative. It's a multi-year effort to grow and deepen creative aging work at the state level. Every state and jurisdiction has a public arts agency that's dedicated to embedding the arts in community life and promoting arts learning opportunities. But not all states have networks or programs dedicated to creative aging. And NASA tested this hypothesis back in 2019 through a national survey. And we learned that almost 80% of states saw a strong need and a high demand for creative aging programming, but they also reported a lot of challenges in meeting those needs. Less than a quarter of them had training to help teaching artists or arts organizations learn how to design programs for older adults. Only 10% had a grant program that was able to dedicate funding to creative aging. More than 80% said that insufficient resources made it hard for them to do this work. This data was gathered before the pandemic, and of course, all of us know how the urgency around these issues has escalated even since then. So the Leveraging State Investments in Creative Aging initiative was established to help states address those gaps. In partnership with our good friends at Ahepa Philanthropies, we launched a national grant program to help spark new creative aging initiatives. We invested $1.5 million across 36 states and jurisdictions to help new programs evolve to serve older adults. So our cohort includes agencies in Guam and Northern Marianas, in Maine, in Montana, and everywhere in between. So I love this initiative for so many reasons, right? The part of me that's a policy geek loves the mechanism of working through state and jurisdictional arts agencies, because we know they're going to achieve broad geographic reach. They're going to ground the work in equity principles, and they'll make sure that the public interest is front and center in these programs. And the part of me that's a daughter of older adults and a short step from that age cohort myself loves that more of these programs are being created in the world to harness all the good things that older adults can contribute to their communities. We thrive, we all thrive when we all thrive. So 36 states and jurisdictions got funds, and no 2 of them are approaching this challenge in the same way. Every state has different populations, different histories to draw on, different geographies. So every one of these programs is unique, and they are all living proof that government ingenuity is not an oxymoron. I am so impressed by all of the different ways that states are designing programs that respect the capabilities of older adults, that offer sustained and sequential arts learning opportunities, and that deepen community ties and social engagement along the way. I also love how our states are attuning these services to the lived experience of older adults who are so much more than the sum of their years. They have multiple identities, they have abundant talent, they have nuanced stories to tell, all of which are blossoming and flourishing through the arts and through creative aging programs. So to give us a glimpse into what this work looks like at the state level, we are super grateful to have Connecticut, North Carolina, and Arizona joining us today. They're gonna lift the hood and give us a peek at their creative aging engines in their states. Each of them has agreed to tell us their stories in NASA's Flashes of Inspiration format. So for those of you who haven't been to a NASA conference before, that's a timed slideshow where our presenters are on a strict 5-minute time limit. This keeps things snappy. It exposes us to a lot of great ideas in a short period of time. So much gratitude to our presenters for being part of that sprint. And thanks to for being willing to show us your playbooks while your new efforts are still getting off the ground. It's great to get a peek into your early thinking. So while our presenters are doing their thing, all of us in the audience have jobs to do too, right? So our first job is to listen for themes and contrasts. So all 3 states, for instance, are doing training, but how are their approaches different? All 3 states are targeting specific populations, but what are the differences in who they're reaching and how they're trying to do that? So have your antenna up for those sorts of things. And your number 2 job as you're listening is to pop some questions into the chat. So we'll do all 3 presentations back to back. Then we'll have a Q&A segment afterwards. But Susan will be tracking the chat throughout, so pop your questions in anytime. Without further ado, I will introduce our first presenter, who is Liz Shapiro from Connecticut. Liz oversees the Connecticut Office of the Arts, the State Historic Preservation Office, and a bunch of museums and historic sites in the state. So with all of those jobs, it is not unusual for me to get emails from Liz in the small hours of the morning. So Liz, thank you for adding this to your docket, and over to you to say hello and let Susan know when to roll your slides.
Hi, thanks. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Kelly. That was a lovely introduction. I do email Kelly first thing in the morning. So I don't want to take up time. I am going to say I'm super happy to be here, and I am here with 2 of my colleagues, Tamara Dimitri and Bonnie Koba, and they are going to be helping me navigate your questions. I'm going to be presenting, but we all know that these are team efforts. So I have brought my team today and feel really glad that I have backup. So Susan, I am ready to go. So the Connecticut Office of the Arts has 3 core goals for our Ready to Age project: to grow arts opportunities for older people in community housing, to develop teaching artists able to work with older adults, and to strengthen future work through organizational partnerships. All COA programs are based on our Ready framework. Once we determine that a program idea fits within our Ready standards, we look to see where Ready intersects with data. Data about our older populations layered with data about population diversity in the state contributed to the development of our Creative Aging Initiative. I'm worried that our slides are not changing. I'm going to go on and we're going to see, oh, here we go. Okay. Data about older populations layered with data about population diversity in the state contributed to the development of our Creative Aging Initiative. Data helps show that Connecticut's older population is statistically underserved. Connecticut is getting older. More than 1/3 of our population is over 50. In 4 years, 20% of people in nearly all our towns will be older adults, but life expectancy is not equal, with African Americans having the lowest. Connecticut is also becoming more diverse. The greater diversity illuminates greater disparities in outcomes for aging adults. This grant offers a way for us to build on the results of a past pilot program addressing outcomes of arts programs on older adults in community housing. In 2019, COA provided a grant to a teaching artist to take what she had learned via a 5-state study funded by NEA to further research the impact of vital involvement with songwriting as the medium on low-income older adults in HUD communities. Research had supported the case that the arts, and in this case, music engagement, help promote positive physical, cognitive, social, and emotional well-being among older adults, increasing their chances of thriving in an independent living setting. In addition, a 2016 study revealed that opportunities for creative aging are not equal across different socioeconomic groups, making creative aging, like so many other advantages, a social privilege. Based on all that research, we designed our 2021 program in the belief that high quality, active sequential learning opportunities taught by skilled teaching artists can help build communities of more active, creative, and youthful older adults. Our program is grounded in the importance of training teaching artists in the skills needed to work with older adults. This program will provide an opportunity to grow and diversify our network and to pilot training and professional development that will be used in future creative aging initiatives. Our call to teaching artists for 2 paid slots with required participation in professional development resulted in 55 applicants, many of whom were not on our radar. The strong response is a great indicator that we've struck a resonant chord. Artists want to learn more. I'm going to wait a second because I think the slides are not quite catching up with us. Maybe we can go to the next slide manually. Okay, let's go to one more. All right, I'll delve right in. Okay, great. To jumpstart the project, we decided to work with pre-existing partners, Sally Rogers, the teaching artist who ran the 2019 project, and Ahepa, a company that runs multiple hub-subsidized housing communities for low-income older adults in the state. Strong creative aging initiatives won't gain traction without cementing future partnerships with state agencies, such as the Department of Aging and Disability Services and the private organizations that serve this demographic. We note a lack of connectivity among these providers. We issued an open call for teaching artists in May with clearly stated obligations, expectations, compensation, and timeline. Application review is underway. Our next steps will include cultural competency training and a peer-to-peer residency and training module led by the lead TA, who will model her songwriting and the vital involvement process and coach the new teaching artists as they use their art forms to teach at one of the 3 Ahepa facilities. Although not in our original application, after diving into the project, staff identified the need to add cultural competency training for the teaching artists and others involved in the program. We've hired a professional outside consultant who will also be joining staff as one of the applicant reviewers. We believe that intentionally grounding this work in equity and awareness will create a better outcome for all. This decision initiated a larger discussion about bringing this training to all program applicants and COA teaching artists. It's important to us to welcome and honor the unique voice, background, and contribution of each participant and teaching artist in multiple ways, including language and visuals. We are using this project to help focus staff awareness on intentional communication, and that includes core design practice, meaning that design, when matched with human values and principles, will meet the needs of the user. We will become better trained to communicate in ways that are reflective of the many voices we represent to provide a welcoming space for everyone. We are learning. We're thrilled to see our idea come to fruition, and sincere thanks from the team at COA to NASA for their dedication to the state and Aroha Philanthropies for the financial support and dedication to the older adult population.
Thank you so much, Liz. So everybody give some on screen or in chat love for Connecticut while we queue up our quick pivot to our next presenter, Zoe VanBuren, the Folklife Director at the North Carolina Arts Council. Zoe has also worked with the Music Maker Relief Foundation to preserve and promote the work of aging roots musicians all across the South to make sure we don't lose those legacies due to ageism, racism, and chronic poverty. So Zoe, the virtual floor is yours to say hi and let Susan know when to run your slides.
Great, thank you, Kelly. Susan, we can get going. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Zoe VanBuren, and I am the Folklife Director at the North Carolina Arts Council. I'm also representing my colleague, Kathleen Collier, who's our Visual Art Director and Accessibility Coordinator and my collaborator in this project. So a quick look at our state tells the story of why we leapt at the opportunity to invest in the arts and aging. So let's meet North Carolina real quick. Of the 10 most populous states in America, we have the largest proportion of people living in rural areas, and we have the largest rural population of any state other than Texas. Older adults are the most rapidly growing population in North Carolina, and by 2050, they're on track to make up 23% of our population, also becoming more diverse every year. The South overall has the highest percentage of people who claim a disability. 49% of North Carolinian adults over age 75 report a disability. And interestingly, over 8% of our population are veterans, with most of them living in rural counties, and the majority over 45 years of age. So the picture is probably taking shape for why we are focusing on rural communities. And there's something else really important about our state. Our grassroots cultures, so many of them from small rural communities, have produced traditions of art, craft, music, dance, worship, play that have influenced our entire nation's sense of self. Some of our most recognized artists, like Wallace Simpson here, are excellent examples of everyday people aging with creativity. Wallace is now recognized as the state folk artist of North Carolina and only began after retirement. The Folklife program at the North Carolina Arts Council has a long history of acknowledging the importance of our oldest artists and culture keepers through programs like the Heritage Awards, and of supporting younger people's access to older generations through the Traditional Arts Programs for Students Network and Folklife apprenticeships. So we know that when we talk about aging in North Carolina, we're looking at both the reality of national trends, of the challenges of aging, but we're also talking about a place with deep wells of culture in our state in which the contributions and creativity of older adults is celebrated, visible, and respected. So from that point of view, older adults are not just potential students, but potential teachers. Creativity is not just their own participation in the arts, but their ability to pass on what they know to next generations. And if we wanted to connect with the rural counties where arts programs like healthcare resources are scarcer on the ground, Folklife was one of the main parts of our agency where rural partners are most represented. Serving older adults in regions with few hospitals, high income inequality, low access to mental and physical wellness resources, and high rates of isolation, we hear all the time from rural partners that they are not just providing engaging arts experiences. They're also concerned with nutrition, exercise, social cohesion, history, education, jobs, the environment, social justice. Rural artists and program coordinators like the Stokoa Valley Cultural Center there view the needs and challenges of their communities from many angles. Our folk life, which comes from these shared experiences of daily life, is often the best place to gather people in creative community. The most socially meaningful creative practice is often that which is rooted in your family, cultural or regional relationships, and that place you in a bigger story of we rather than me. But while our Folklife program has long centered on both older North Carolinians and rural communities, we've really never had a concerted effort to concentrate on the experience of aging or the promotion of creative aging programs. The conversation around cultural tradition has often focused on reaching the young rather than on what participating in community or family culture does for us as we age, or what the act of teaching brings to the teacher. So we are starting at the beginning. We are targeting our creative aging program to arts administrators and community artists, some of whom who are already engaging older adults through the arts, some of whom are not yet. Here's our cohort group on Zoom together, but who all have a strong interest in the well-being of their elders and the potential to provide future programs from where they are. This is a really wide-ranging group. We have artist organizers, heritage centers, farm worker and refugee service orgs, veteran groups, and they are a learning cohort. The workshops have begun with state leaders in ageism and accessibility, then turning to the Creative Aging Network NC, Indiana folklorist John Kay, who brings a focus on aging and traditional vernacular arts, teaching artist panel, cultural organizers. Our goal is to build connections where they did not exist before. We believe that the workshop leaders really have as much to learn from the grassroots experiences of the cohort as vice versa. We expected and are seeing that these perspectives sometimes flow, sometimes don't, For some, the research around aging and creative aging program design are great tools and inspiration. For others, maybe they don't quite jibe with local realities or the culture of their communities. We're inspired to not only consider aging in all our work going forward, but to continue exploring the fact that when we're thinking about the experience of aging, the needs and assets of rural communities, and the diversity of our state, one size just will never fit all.
Thank you so much, Zoe. All right, everybody give a big round of virtual applause to North Carolina. And now I am dying to hear what's up in Arizona. So to give us that scoop, we will hear from Elisa Garcia-Radcliffe. Elisa runs the Arts Learning Portfolio for the Arizona Commission on the Arts. They're an educator, a movement artist, an alumni of the National Association of Latino Arts and Cultures Leadership Cohort, and pretty much an all-around ninja arts administrator. So Elisa, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Susan, I'm ready to go when you are. So over the past 5 years, the Arizona Commission on the Arts has developed a strong platform for creative aging. The Investing in Rural and BIPOC Creative Aging Communities project will grow that work, engaging a cohort of 10 arts organizations throughout the state in the development of a comprehensive creative aging program. The Arts Commission has long had a lifelong learning mission for its arts learning department. In 2015, the agency developed one of its most ambitious programs to date, the AZ Creative Aging Initiative. Through the initiative, teaching artists developed the specialized tools and knowledge required to work with aging and healthcare service providers and the older adult recipients of their services through the Teaching Artist Institute. Arts organizations developed skills that engage new participants and help retain older adults, increasing the breadth of their service and opening the doors to new communities through the Generations Lab and the Create Change AZ Institute. And finally, the aging and healthcare service providers developed strong relationships with artists and arts organizations and learned to utilize arts-based processes and arts engagement in their facilities through creative engagement trainings, creative communities of care partnerships, with time slips and other pilot programs. Throughout the 3-year initiative, we strengthened skills and expertise within the art sector and creative aging program development and partnership, increased implementation of robust creative aging programs by arts organizations, and explored program models for aging and healthcare service providers in creative aging. And throughout this initiative, we revisited 3 pillars upon which the initiative was designed. First, process-based approach, person-centered care, and finally, cultural responsiveness. With another 2 years of support from the Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust, the AZ Creative Aging 2.0 launched in January of 2019 with a 5-part comprehensive strategic visioning process that convened teaching artists, arts organizations, and older adult and healthcare organizations. And this process prioritized the perspective and voices of creative aging sector in an effort to strengthen the creative aging movements in Arizona. The process successfully gathered information from community leaders and local creative aging experts to articulate and define a set of strategies that were unique to Arizona. This work has largely been supported by the Piper Trust, a local foundation in Maricopa County, and due to their geographic funding restrictions, much of the programmatic pilot work has occurred in Maricopa County. NASA's leveraging state investment in creative aging funding is providing an opportunity for the agency to expand and deepen its AZ creative aging network statewide by providing a meaningful investment in rural and BIPOC organizations across the state. Arizona is home to a substantial and growing population of older adult residents. Between 2010 and 17, the percent of Arizona residents age 65 plus increased from 13 to 17% and is currently estimated to be about 20%. We know that within the next 5 years, there will be as many people over 65 as under 15 years of age living in Arizona. And this increasing older population is also increasingly diverse, is what we're seeing in our state. The state projects that every racial and ethnic group over the age of 65 will at least double in size by 2025. So cultural relevance will be critical to improving the overall population health of aging Arizonans. While 62% of Arizona's population is located in Maricopa County, the state is also comprised of many unique rural communities, including 22 federally recognized indigenous nations, whose traditional and ancestral homelands make up present-day Arizona and which currently steward a quarter of the land. So knowing what we know about the changing demographics of our state and our inability to previously invest deeply in communities outside of Maricopa County, we believe that it's vital in this moment to prioritize rural and BIPOC communities throughout the state. We modeled this project after the Generations Lab, which we originally piloted in 2016. The agency will identify a cohort of BIPOC and rural organizations to engage in the development of comprehensive creative aging programs or deepen current creative aging programming within their organization. The effort aims to explore the ideas of process-based approach and focuses on accessibility, asset mapping, and partnership building, methods and tools of assessing and evaluating creative aging. Cohort organizations will be paired with a peer mentor from our current AZ Creative Aging Network. This is a way to tap into the learning that has occurred within the last 5 years through the AZ Creative Aging Initiative and just generally broaden the network. Each organization will then receive a grant to support their creative aging work going forward. By combining professional development, assets, and needs assessments and customized consultations, the overall initiative is designed to encourage experimentation, center the participating organization's assets, and support each organization in developing a plan aligned with their organizational mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. So everybody give a big whoop for Arizona as well. So thank you to all three of you. Those were really fantastic. Your presentation sparked my curiosity and my appetite to learn more. So if you have questions for any or all of our presenters, go ahead and send them through the chat channel and we will field them as we go along. And also, if you heard recurring themes or if you heard interesting contrasts, let's signpost those in the chat channel as well. So as your fingers are busy working on that, I've got a few questions to kick us off and begin our conversation. First for Connecticut, the presenter that gets the award for the best use of cats in her presentation. So Liz and Team Connecticut, I'm curious, not very many state arts agencies have worked with projects specifically focused in community housing and public housing. And so I think it's really fascinating and great that you looked at that pilot program as a spark to then grow more creative aging work with that population. So my question, thinking about other state arts agencies who might want to initiate similar connections. My question for Connecticut is, so did you have to convince that population to learn about a state arts agency? Did you have to convince those providers to make room for creative aging? Talk to me about that partnership cultivation approach.
So that's a great question. I'm gonna start by responding and I'm gonna tee up Bonnie, who has been with the prior pilot, because I think that will help explain. So as I mentioned in my very fast slides, we did decide to sort of set ourselves up for greater success in a quicker way by working with a housing, community housing owner company, parent company, Ahepa, that we had worked with before. So that said, a lot of things had changed. And so in our initial conversations and finding the right person and sort of having that first conversation, there was some confusion, but it kind of magically straightened out very, very quickly. And Bonnie, I'm gonna turn it over to you to kind of do the pre-setup.
Sure. So actually, it was actually very easy for us to connect with Ahepa because they had been part of the NEA research study. And the same teaching artist then wanted to continue that work in 2019 and gave her a small grant to do so. So she had built, and they had really strong outcomes from those two experiences. So that particular teaching artist had already built a relationship with the people in these facilities, both the residents and the people who were in charge of developing opportunities for the residents, and the management team. And so she really just introduced us and gave us a way in and They were so thrilled with the opportunities that were given to this population, which they do not normally receive because they are low income and they're not going out on their own to find creative ways of aging on their own. They were happy to jump on board and really, have expressed interest in doing as much of this as we would like to do with them. That said, I also just want to qualify that it's a place for us to start, but we know that there's a lot of other places that we need to go. And boy, I got some great ideas from my colleagues' presentations today as well.
I know we all did. And then another question that I saw coming through the chat a little earlier, which was about the cultural competency training. Can you describe a little bit more about what that has entailed for you?
So we haven't started that particular piece yet, but what I can tell you is our staff is small, so we only have 4 program people and a grants administrator. So we do and me, but I do a couple of other things too. So as we were having initial conversations, we just realized by sort of what we were hearing that maybe not everybody was where the staff was. We weren't landing in the same place. We weren't using the same kinds of vocabulary. And because one of the things that was really important to us was to find teaching artists to participate in this program who were reflective of the communities that were served, we decided we better take a step back. So we're actually going to be working with Mina Malik, who some of you may know, who is a participant in the cultural equity learning community. We've worked with her before, and she is going to be working with the cohort who will be going through this program. And just to answer Michael's question, we're going to be, because it sort of dovetails, we are actually going to be just training the 2 that have gotten selected. But that said, we're looking at, we can see that there's just a big need out there. So this was like, you open the door a crack and everyone comes out. So now we're like, oh gosh, okay, what is this going to look like? Because we need to do follow up.
For sure. Well, and how to take advantage of the tremendous demand for these opportunities is the problem we want to have. More people wanting to join in this work, for sure. I want to flip to North Carolina for a second, Zoe. So did I see your slide right? 80 rural counties in North Carolina, is that right? Or did I kind of dream that? That's a lot of ground to cover. So how are you picking where you will work? What's your lens for that?
That is a great question. So yes, we have 100 counties in North Carolina, and 80 of them are classified as rural. Not all sort of experience the same ruralness. Some are within much easier reach of an urban center. Many are extremely rural. So it was important to us in who we brought into this program to have not only sort of community demographic representation, but geographic representation. We are working with people from the mountains to the sea, to the Piedmont, to the coastal plain. And simultaneously, we're also working with individuals in a lot of different kinds of settings. So we have folks in the cohort who are from community public libraries or from universities, or they themselves are community organizers in a rural county. And we kind of started with the lens of people who were somewhat already within our reach through my work network, through the Folklife program. So we kind of started our conversations there. But then as we began speaking also with the program presenters, the gerontologist from UNCW and our Creative Aging Network, we kind of started to hear also, well, now you should also think about people who are in these kinds of settings and this kind of organization. And here's some people we've heard are, poised to kind of do something along these lines. we sort of had to kind of piece it all together based off of all these different lenses and inputs, and then people's availability, of course. But because we knew that we were starting really from a very early point, our interest was in a big umbrella, a big tent, a lot of voices coming to the table to think about, what is creative aging here? What is creative aging for us and for these communities? So it's really kind of about everybody at the moment, and our hope is that as we kind of learn these sort of little insights into what is unique, what are unique challenges or assets or different experiences in each of these regions who are represented, that maybe that plants the seed for kind of deeper work in the future.
Yeah, so it sounds very much like you are working your network, like you are taking in opportunities and then are gonna make selections where there's kind of a sweet spot between need and capacity to spark. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, exactly. And who's sort of poised and ready to think about this. Not all of the people that we are working with in the cohort are currently already doing anything through a lens of creative aging. Some that is deeply, deeply embedded in what they do. We also, what has been really special about this opportunity though, especially with the partnership with NASA and Ahepa Philanthropies, is that it's allowed us to work with types of organizations that normally it's challenging to partner with from a state arts council point of view. So we are able to work, for example, with a NC Field, a farm workers kind of advocacy organization who it would be a challenge to kind of come in through our grant program, maybe in another sense. And so that's been a really, really special opportunity with this work to make relationships, not only in counties we don't, highly serve already, but with ways that community organizations operate and, organize themselves that can normally be a little challenging to partner with.
Mm-hmm. Well, when NASA did our survey of state arts agencies and we took inventory of the types of partners that state arts agencies were working with, we did not ask about, community housing groups. We did not ask about people who are working in the food industries, right? And now we are learning that we can and we should, because they're all part of this network of a whole life well lived at the community level. So we too are learning right along with you as you go. Elisa, a couple questions for you. You, if I heard you right, you noted that there were 22 tribes in Arizona. And I'm curious, could you say some more about your strategies for connecting with First Nations and for engaging Indigenous people in the Creative Aging Initiative work that you're doing?
Yeah, sure thing. Actually, we're at the Arts Commission are in the middle of a deep dive into tribal relations and how we've approached in the past relationships and partnerships and even granting and funding tribal relationships. With our help of one of my colleagues, Anna Needman, she has just created a huge report for our board, and we've all been undergoing trainings with the Office of the Governor's Office for Tribal Relations. And so we've been pulling together all the data, again, about who we've been funding, what partnerships we have, what relationships we have, in order to understand how best, because as many states know, it's a little bit challenging to engage the tribal nations for good reasons. They're often not, wary of us as a government agency. So right now, our response and our approach to them is slow. Meeting them where they are, just, providing the opportunities when we can, reaching out and, not trying to force anything at this moment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Love that to lead by listening for sure. And then, all right, so I'm a research geek, so I got to ask this. You mentioned that part of your model and your vision for creative aging work in the state is about encouraging more assessment and evaluation. so that people can speak to and learn about the impact of creative aging programs. So I'd love for you to elaborate on that and say a little bit more about the kinds of research that you envision or that have taken place, or the kinds of research you think is needed.
Yeah. That's a good question. So over the last year, actually, we had an opportunity, and we're moving forward with something that we are calling Research Oppalooza, where we engaged one of our cohort members from our original Creative Aging Initiative, Dr. Melita Belgrave, who's at Arizona State University, to train teaching artists and arts organizations in different methods for evaluating and assessing their programming. And so really trying to meet each group where they are. So we had some organizations that just had this like mountain of data, right? That they didn't really know what they were going to do with. So we were training them to sort of go back and try to pull out interesting metrics or things that they can use to move forward in their projects. We also had teaching artists that were just, doing evaluations because they knew they had to do it, but it really wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't helping their programming. It wasn't changing anything about their approaches. So that's one of the ways we're doing it. Also, we noticed with teaching artists and arts organizations and institutions, again, there was a lot of evaluation happening, but not a lot of communication afterwards. So we just wanted to make sure that people were doing this for a reason, not just because they had to. And another thing that we were very interested at the Arts Commission was trying to set forth a certain amount of questions that could potentially all be similar across all of the programs throughout the state, so that we can gather those metrics. We have some ideas about who's in these creative aging programs, right? Who's participating, but we would like to have a better sense of what's really going on in the communities.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I love that. The other thing I wanted to pull a thread on, again, this is kind of piggybacking off of a question that Kim asked earlier that we talked about with Connecticut, but this idea of cultural responsiveness, right? So you mentioned that cultural responsiveness was just a kind of a central touchstone core value of the creative aging work that you're doing in Arizona. So can you say some more about Arizona style, what that means, and how you are trying to achieve it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us in Arizona, we partnered in our initiative with Jorge Merced from Pregones Theater in our training for our teaching artists and our arts organizations. And for us in Arizona, what that really means is that when we send our teaching artists out, or our organizations are creating programming, that they're taking into consideration who might show up, right? And being sensitive to the needs of those people. So it's really about accessibility, about making people comfortable in a space, is really what we're touching on in our programming.
So I'd like to open it up to all three of you actually for the next question that I've got. So as we were listening earlier to our colleagues from Ping Chong and Company, they talked about that intersection, right? We saw the diagram where they talked about that intersection between place and identity and belonging, right? As really the nexus of where people live and where so much powerful creative work can happen. So all three of you, North Carolina, Arizona, and Connecticut, have talked a lot about the intersection between place and identity in some really powerful ways. I'd like to invite you to talk a little bit more about the belonging piece and about how your work, your site, the artists that you will be engaging to do the work are creating opportunities for that belonging element. So would anybody like to tackle that one?
I can start. So we're in a sort of unique situation where we've actually held many of our cohort sessions already. We got started pretty early in the summer, and so we kind of have the benefit of a couple like examples that have come up so far in our workshops. One of the presenters that we are partnering with are two women in Warren County, North Carolina, which is a rural county kind of on the Virginia border. and but also a place with incredibly important community history. It's the birthplace of the environmental justice movement, the first time that there was a sort of cross-racial coalition of communities speaking up about environmental racism. It also has a deep history of enslavement and former, wealth and then kind of economic decline, and also has a deep quilting history and is connected to the Gee's Bend quilters in Alabama, actually. So the two speakers we had kind of sharing about some of the community building work that they do in their county are just sort of fonts of examples of how by using these kind of universal themes, as one of our other cohort members put it, of like ancestry, genealogy, looking kind of back to the past, it opens the conversation for everybody in the room. Everybody has a grandparent, everybody has an ancestor, everybody will be an ancestor to somebody. And and they sort of shared about the work that they do, combining traditional crafts like quilting, African American story quilting traditions with writing prompts and exercises that kind of get people thinking about themselves, their history in a place, their belongingness to a place, and then expressing those memories through a visual art form. So those who are more comfortable in the writing lane sort of thrive there and then stretch in the textile arts lane and vice versa. And they sort of reflected on how important it is to kind of start from these universal things that we all share to open up difficult conversations about the place of a history or what makes us feel like we do or don't belong in a place. And so it's a really important thread that's kind of come through a lot of the discussions that we've had in our cohort conversations, that additionally, as you age and potentially risk feeling isolated geographically or socially, spaces where you are still the teacher, where you have access to what John Kay, the Indiana folklorist we're working with, keeps referring to generativity, the kind of natural impulse to create something that outlasts you and to pass it on to another generation. That all of that creates sort of a reason for being and a sense of belonging in a community, if not maybe it's a geographic community, maybe it's a cultural community, that is the healthiest thing you can have sort of going in your life as you age. So it's been such a rich topic to sort of learn about, and also shifted a lot of the ways that we've thought about our existing work. Like I mentioned in my presentation, work that we have always kind of historically viewed from the perspective of what is this bringing to the young people? What is this bringing to the youth in this program? And instead saying, wait a minute, we have all these older adults in this too, and surely this is changing their experience of belongingness here as much as it's changing the young people's experience of belongingness.
I love that opportunity to flip the script. Liz, Elisa, or Bonnie or Tamara, thoughts about belonging and
Sure,
how your work can support that.
I'll jump in for Connecticut, and then I'm wondering if Tamara wants to jump in as well. We're sadly not as far along as Zoe. We're like in the infancy of this. But my experience with teaching artists has been that through the arts, belonging becomes a center and a joiner of people. And so regardless of the place and the identity, when teaching artists come to the table and they bring those arts experiences and opportunities, and they are skilled in understanding how to be inclusive in all of their sequential lessons and how to develop sequential lessons so that they are inclusive in how to be flexible in their planning so that they're meeting the needs of folks that they're working with. Also, how to empower people through the art form. To me, that becomes sort of the, that becomes the heart of belonging. And that's how, in all of the presentations, what I see and understand is that there is a coming together through the arts, whether it is, older adults teaching younger adults or younger adults teaching older adults. It's the sharing of the art in the art experience, the arts experience, that really does help to develop that sense of belonging. And I think when teaching artists are at the table, that just sort of explodes exponentially.
Mhm.
I would just add too that we're bringing together people who live in a community together, right? But they may not be showing up together. So they can be isolated within their community because of a multitude of reasons. And the hope is that that art form that our teaching artists will use, and what we've had experience with in the past has been songwriting, is going to have that universal component. Like, we know about what memory and Alzheimer's patients, and music, how that goes together. But there is that, like, I am now sharing something that I love or is meaningful with you, which actually could build in the community, and a community within a community that would hopefully be expanding.
Mhm.
And I'd love to share one more point from a slightly different perspective that still impacts the teaching artists as well as the participants. And that's the fact that, this way we've structured this particular program is we have the mentor and then the two apprentice individuals. And as they go through their residency, there will be that give and take of a teaching learning atmosphere. And so even the older adults who are participants in the residency will actually see learning in action, because the apprentice will be, performing and teaching the class, but they will have the mentor there and in that presence to be jumping in to assist. And I love the idea, and even for us as we're growing and developing this program, it's all about learning along the way. And so it's like we're going through this big sequential learning process that's not just simply part of the creative aging sort of program, but it's us going through that. It's the teaching artists as they're going through the training. And I think along the way, the participants are experiencing that as well.
Right, that idea of reflective practice as really central to developing art skills and creative skills that's being modeled at every point in the chain for you guys. Elisa, thoughts?
Yeah, two things came up for me in terms of belonging in our initial work. Just the importance of community spaces for a lot of these programs, right? That I think Zoe brought up, that we know that creative arts is really still seen as a social privilege, and its participation is really linked to that socioeconomic status. So even in BIPOC communities, there might be these large arts institutions or museums, but they don't feel readily able to participate in those spaces. And that when we noticed, at least, that when we really shifted towards senior centers and libraries and other community spaces, that we tended to engage participants that were more closely aligned with the demographics of that community. And then the other thing in terms of belonging, as we're sort of in our infancy also in our project, so we're just gathering our organizations together. But initially we had an oversight. We didn't distribute the materials in Spanish, which in Arizona, if you're trying to engage BIPOC communities or rural communities, especially communities that are along the border, that's going to be problematic. So we had to quickly adjust that and plan for making sure that all of the meetings and the learning sessions and the mentoring had that same sort of language access for all of the participants.
Mm-hmm. I love that you mentioned that, right? I love that you mentioned that as an important strategy for your population. And I love that you mentioned that, and here's what we learned. We got to do it this way. Very, very helpful. So I want to pull a thread from a question that that Michael asked a little while ago in the chat thread, and it's about this idea of nothing about us without us, right? That engaging the intended beneficiaries of an initiative from the very beginning is a really important aspect to make sure that programs respond to the needs and desires of the communities that we are hoping to serve. So can any of you speak to how you are approaching that nothing about us without us idea and engaging older adults in the design and delivery of the programs?
I'll start us off this time, I guess. So yeah, we had a big strategic visioning process in 2019. And during that process, we failed to engage older adults as stakeholders, which was, we really tried, but it never really happened. We were able to talk to the teaching artists, the arts organizations, the aging and healthcare organizations, but we were missing that key component. And so moving with this work that we're doing for our rural and BIPOC creative aging communities cohort, we are making it a component. They're going to be creating proposals, but before they can create a proposal, we're asking them to have a community meeting where they must engage with their older adults in their communities before they decide on programming.
I guess the way that I would respond to that question is that the program that we're developing is really mutable. So we did a pilot. So we have the information that we received from the people who participated in the first pilot. And that information is going to be used as the second pilot unfolds. But nothing about how the actual arts learning occurs is written in stone. So it's designed to be extremely responsive to where people are in the different places. We're working in 3 different communities in 3 physical locations. They're going to look different, and people are going to want different kinds and need different kinds of things. So I don't see this as a finished, or as anything written in stone, and not a one size fits all at all.
Yeah. So how about North Carolina?
So just sort of looking at the room of our cohort participants, there's a real age range. There's very young teaching artists just out of college. There are representatives from our partner organizations who themselves are older adults contemplating, retirement in the near years, and so I think all throughout there has been sort of it's shown sort of by who's in the group that that in your older years, you may still be on kind of the program design end. You are still the actor, the agent in the situation, or the decision maker. And similarly, we really did not want to kind of approach, or from our perspective, we did not want to prescribe a single model, a single way of kind of understanding what a creative aging program is. I mean, we're trying to sort of use the best practices of sequential learning and time for connectivity in our own workshops, but we know that when it comes down to the people in their communities, their neighbors, their audiences, we want creativity, we want flexibility in program design, we want listening before planning, and we're hearing all kinds of different needs. One organization, we had a session actually just this morning, and one organization was saying, look, we had a great conversation talking together and just realized like need means something so different for us. In our veterans focused organization, the need is healing. In this African-American Cultural Centers situation, the need is preserving stories and memory and history. And similarly, I think because a lot of the folks who are in the cohort are themselves older adults and often older artists, we're kind of seeing new lenses on how deep this work needs to go in the future, places where we need to learn more and focus more. For example, when we talk about the experience of aging, I think a lot of the data backs up a very a sort of homogenous picture of what, you know, ageism or the challenges of aging look like. And we have participants in the cohort are saying, like, that doesn't look like my experience, you know, as an Indigenous person. Like, to be older is very, you know, it's a very different identity. It's a very different relationship to other generations. So, you know, since we're kind of at the beginning of our journey in thinking about and looking at creative aging as a field or as a point of focus, it's been really, really important that a lot of the cohort members, a lot of the people we are sort of looking to as potential designers of more local programs, are themselves coming to this with lived experience of being older. Although, as we were reminded, we are all aging, you know, no matter how old you are, we are all experiencing aging. And, you know, similarly, just sort of looping back to that belonging question too, one of the women we're working with mentioned, like, the need for belongingness as an artist getting older, and the need for support and as a place as maybe other organizations might start turning toward younger and younger partnerships with younger and younger artists to kind of reinforce the significance and what older artists are bringing to the table, and creating kind of spaces of belonging for them, and also welcoming kind of older people into calling themselves an artist for the very first time and saying, you belong in this conversation as well, or you belong as an artist even if you didn't start until you were retired. So yeah, it's been really essential, and I think shown us the way for future work and where we need to keep learning.
Mm-hmm. I love what all three of your states have been talking about in this realm, because it really reminds me, thinking back to last week when we had the session on best practices with lifetime arts, and they really talked about the perils of generalizing, that no two older adults are alike, no two sites are alike, no two classes are alike. And all of you are really talking about baking that responsiveness into the design and the delivery of the work that you're doing. So I think that's wonderful. So you spoke a little bit, Zoe, about in the future, right? About looking to what we might do in the future. And I actually wanted to invite all three of you to, based on what you know now, right? If you did not have capacity constraints at the moment, and if you had the more resources to bring to this work, what would you imagine would be a powerful next step? What would you imagine to be a powerful next step in this? So I'll invite you to go perhaps in the order in which you presented, if you would entertain that. So that would put us first with Liz, and then with Zoe, and then with Elisa.
Can it be next steps? Can it be
Sure?
plural?
Yes, absolutely.
So the first thing would be something that we already touched upon. We have 55 applicants to our program. So the next step, and actually I have notes about sort of how do we investigate this and if it's still possible, because we're still reviewing resumes, but is to train a cohort of people so that they feel, cohort of teaching artists, so that they feel more skilled at working with older adults. So that would be a first step, because I think this idea of cohorts who have a strong interest in something just creates and builds and supports partnerships. So that would be the first thing that I would do. And then the second thing, I also believe that it's so much about personal relationships. So as we're developing, if I had the time, all the time in the world, I would spend, and I'm going to end up probably doing a lot of this anyway, but spend really a lot of time getting to know and people at all the state agencies and the statewide agencies that are private who provide these services, because if we can begin to have a conversation like we've already begun in little pieces, then the sky becomes the limit, because everybody brings an eye to what this population needs in Connecticut and has great ideas. And we just need to work together to figure out who does what. So those are the two things that I would do: big picture and maybe a little bit more practical.
I'd like to add to that if I can, for Connecticut. Something that really intrigues me is the idea of the older teaching artists interacting with younger people and being empowered to be the leaders in the project. As somebody who is my age and looking towards next steps myself, I realize that I'm not always in either camp of having to be the learner or having to be the teacher, that whenever I work, I'm doing both, right? I'm always learning and teaching together. And so that figuring out a way to bring mentor teams together or collaborative teams together that are older and younger, not necessarily as one mentoring the other, but as collaborative partners and developing something together. I think that might be a good challenge to put out there to folks, so that they connect as they may around collaborative ideas. And I also wanted to just sort of circle back a little bit to the idea of nothing about us without us, and the tying that to the sense of belonging. That I may be crazy because I haven't not steeped in this work yet, but my feeling is that in arts and education, as we work in classrooms, or we have teaching artists work in classrooms, the thing that engages kids is the opportunity for their voice to be heard. And they are empowered by the opportunity of their voice. And I don't see this as different. I think that, and again, as a person who is aging myself, I do see that when you get to a certain point, you become wondering if, what you have to offer is really valuable. And I believe that what people who are older adults have to offer is really valuable. But I also totally believe in lifelong learning, and that everybody always has something to learn. And so I'm always a little bit leery about putting one cart before one horse, when I feel like, without the cart or the horse, nobody goes anywhere, right? And so trying to figure out how to pull the pieces together. So for me, it's thinking about ways of really empowering intergenerational relationships that move the whole idea and concept forward into something that in one of the previous sessions they talked about. How about other cultures where older adults are really valued, right? And in our culture, that's not always the case. So I see the necessity and the beauty of pulling those pieces together as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is it
Elisa.
okay? Oh, can I jump in on one quick point with Connecticut?
Sure.
And that's to add in. First off, I appreciate Bonnie and Liz and their ability to accept my cats within the presentation. Because we are a new program, we don't have the visuals to go along with this. And so I know I've been a big champion on the project to ensure that we are engaging photographers, we're engaging videographers, we're capturing the story, because visuals are incredibly important. And it will be something that will help us to move this work forward at a greater pace.
Wonderful. Elisa?
Oh yeah, sure. Zoe, you put it in the chat. So yeah, I think for us in Arizona, a great next step, if I had the capacity, would be to support some sort of network of practitioners, something that would help deepen the collaboration and relationship between the artists and the organizations, and continue with our research and evaluation efforts and just general communication amongst the peers. That's seemingly what our network has been telling us they want next, and so supporting that, I think, would be a great next step for us.
That sounds wonderful. And my apologies, Zoe, I went out of order. So please let us know what your wish list would be for future work.
That's all right. I was hoping with a little bit of extra time, I would settle on just one thing, but I didn't. I mean, a lot of things come to mind. I mean, this, I think for us at the moment is in the phase of being a little bit of a one-off, effort because of the funding availability. But I think about, ways to try to sort of embed this perspective into more sustainable resources that we already offer. And so our next step with our program, once our cohort sort of concludes meeting, is that we would like to put together sort of a guide that is North Carolina specific with a lot of the takeaways from our cohorts, and make it accessible and available to one of North Carolina's greatest assets in particular, which is our network of local arts councils. We have county level arts councils serving in one way or another almost all 100 counties, whether or not that's sort of they're located there or they kind of have a partnership service range. And these are the folks who I think, sometimes this really deep community work, it's a little hard to sort of come to your state arts council for that kind of support. If you need to buy, food, for example, which is a hugely important part of community organizing, you can't come to your state arts council for that. So thinking kind of about the local level and who our network is there, finding ways to kind of bring more of our local arts councils in on this conversation, helping them kind of step into this lens too. And then I think that would go a long way toward, when we do see, for example, like a project support application in our grant processes or in our local arts council's grant processes, that seeing that the audience is primarily older would not be a disadvantage for that applicant, because I think that's kind of the condition we're in now, is that people look at older audiences as a problem, or a primary older constituency as a problem. The question is always, how do we engage younger audiences? How do we get more young people in our space? And the question is rarely, how do we, serve this audience we do have in a more meaningful, engaged way that treats them as an asset and not just as a retiree with more disposable income or time on their hands or something. So I think that goes a long way, but also something that has come up a lot, thinking sort of besides funding opportunities, is the importance of helping local organizations do their own kind of community asset mapping, do their own field work, get to know their own communities, talk to older people in their area, understand their needs, understand their skills and what they bring and the stories they hold and the history of the places that they're in. Because we see that, where people really want this work and really need this work, they find ways to make it happen. They're doing it, but what they have is that knowledge of place, of who's in their community, of who to talk to, of what partnerships to make. They have a very clear sense of a story about, where they are and what they're doing. And so we've definitely seen, a lot of curiosity kind of coming up among our cohort members about getting started in that process of becoming more educated about one's own community and the people in it who have long memories and lots of relationships and knowledge. So yeah, so many things. We very much feel that we're at the beginning, but I think for us a big next step would be really kind of activating our local networks.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love all of those ideas. You know, it makes me love the present, and it makes me look forward to the future of what you all have on tap. I think we are coming to a natural wrap point for today's session. Before I toss things back to Susan to sew up the 2021 Creative Aging Institute, I want to do a couple things. Number one, I want to plug that there will be a 2022 Creative Aging Institute. So all of this and more, we can look forward to that next year. And I also really want to thank the state arts agencies who are part of this work. I want to offer sincere gratitude to our 3 presenters for the heart and the soul and the info that you all shared, and also want to give a shout out to our other 33 states and jurisdictions who are all doing equally exciting and fascinating things too. This work is important. This work will ultimately change the lived experience, the perceptions and the narratives around what it is to grow older in America. And you are doing that with a focus on bringing creative aging opportunities to people that have experienced a lot of historic and current barriers to arts access, breaking down barriers and spreading joy in the process. It's what state arts agencies are all about. And NASA is super proud to be part of that. So thank you all. And Susan, back over to you.
Thanks, Kelly. And I really can't believe that we are just about to close our 2021 Creative Aging Institute. Here we are. Thank you again, Elisa and Zoe and Bonnie and Tamara and Liz and Kelly for a really, really great and informative session. I think you all, this was the perfect way to bring the entire Creative Aging Institute to a close, an exciting one and an inspiring one. Once again, NASA is so very grateful for the enthusiastic support from our partners at Ahepa Philanthropies. Truly, their support has enabled us to gather online for this inaugural Creative Aging Institute as a learning community. And so really thank you, Ellen and Teresa, Sarah, Lindsay, and everyone at Ahepa. And I want to thank each of you also who participated as presenters and audience members alike. I wish you all great good luck in your work, and I look forward to seeing how you advance creative aging in your communities across the country. Stay in touch. Thank you very much, and goodbye.